Welcome to the Iona-Hoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flatico.
Ho, 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 Gale Nation. Season 5, Episode 11, Iona-Hoops.com podcast. Here you are with an early present from me. Well, if you want to call it that, maybe it's a bag of coal or something else. I don't know. Anyway, Gale's finally getting it going. 2 wins in a row with the win at Colgate yesterday. We'll have some more on that later. We're also going to have a new guest to the podcast, Marley Pope from Marist Center Field, as we get ready to take on the Foxes after non-conference play concludes pretty soon. But before we get into all of that and talk little MAAC hoops and little Iona hoops from on the men's side, we have an Iona on the women's team.
Ionas.
Hey, the Iona women are tied for first, 2-0. Who saw that coming? 50-44 home win over Sacred Heart, 56-50 come from behind win at St. Peter's to open up MAAC play for the women. Yeah, I know, it's not Fairfield, it's not Quinnipiac, it's not anybody like that, but hey, you got to start somewhere. Win the games you're supposed to win, and then the rest will follow, we hope. But it's a nice little turnaround after, again, just like the men, a rocky non-conference performance. But, in the win at home against Sacred Heart, defense was a story, giving up only 32% shooting from the field, while the Lady Gales made 45% from three. Chloe Vasquez had 17, Zoe Ward 10 points, 12 boards, 5 assists. Ella Fajardo had 13 points and was 3 of 4 from three and also had 5 assists. And then the St. Peter's game, how about a 19-6 fourth quarter to come back to win that one? Fajardo again, 17 points. She was 3 of 5 from three, 4 assists in that one. Destiny Salgado added 12 and 5. Judith Gomez, 11 and 5. St. Peter's shot only 39%, so the defense has been good. Hey, you got to start somewhere, and the Lady Gales are doing it. Congrats to them. Let's hope they keep it going as we wrap up non-conference play for them and also dive into the MAAC portion of the schedule once we cross over into January. Nice job, Lady Gales. And well, with that, let's talk about the men and go to the state of the Gales. Well, you know what? You want to talk about the Colgate game yesterday, and we should certainly get to that. We had a nice 14-day break from Iona basketball. They had the win against St. Peter's, so at least they went on the break on the right note. The team got healthy, as we saw Christian Winborn join the team for the first time yesterday. So it's good to see him back out there. He does bring some things. But let's talk about what yesterday actually meant. Iona with a nice, tidy 79-73 victory over Colgate yesterday. Just a generally better performance. I think what we've been saying all along, we saw some disastrous performances from the Gales early on. We saw progress in the Bahamas, but not wins. Sacred Heart happened. And then, I can't say you can't just forget about it, but if you just look past that for a minute, now we're making progress again. We go on the road to get a win against a team that's also struggling and needed a win, and a team that, quite frankly, I thought would be ready to kick our butts after we handled them at Iona last year around this time. So I kind of was worried about this one, and people were wondering why I picked Colgate in the point spread game yesterday. I was worried about this game. I thought, it's a tough spot. You have 14 days off, guys coming into the lineup after, not playing, kind of tough to get in the flow. Colgate was at home. They got a player back. That's very important to them. I was a little worried about this one, and it turned out that I guess I shouldn't have worried so much. The Gales, looked better yesterday. It's funny. You look at the Iona message board and you see the nitpicking of things that are still not being done well. But you know what? You still have to look. But you have to just remember where we were and just realize things are starting to get better. What are we doing better right now than we weren't doing? I think the press is more effective right now. I thought it looked as good as it has looked all year. Yesterday, after the press was broken, things were not so good. So that's another conversation. But we'll come back to that. On the offensive end, we made shots. We moved the ball pretty well. This was the first time, I think, all season that we had an even assist to turnover ratio, because I think every game we've had more turnovers than assists until yesterday when they're 14-14. And I was, when you turn the ball over a lot as a team and then you get that number down under 15, that's a start. We're never going to be a team that only turns the ball over 7-8 times a game. It's just not who we are. But if you can get that number to the lower teens and also get the assists closer to that same ballpark at closer to 15 or so a game, you're talking about a lot of attempts to move the ball. It's going to have some turnovers. Yeah, there's going to be unforced turnovers. Again, we have a lot of freshmen playing. Those things are going to happen. We have guys in and out of lineup with injuries, so they're not in the flow always. Those things are going to happen. But you have to look past some of that and start to say, what's starting to turn around? I thought the team moved better without the ball yesterday. I thought we were cutting to the basket. I thought it wasn't as just bogged up, in places. I mean, you get some of that stalling every now and then. People were actually questioning, Clarence Rupert on top of the key, handling the ball a lot. Dude had 5 assists though, and only 1 turnover. So, is he a point forward for us? No, but he certainly didn't hurt us up there. And, and of course, Day-Day Reeves is still just getting it done. 20 points yesterday. Also 9 boards. I mean, that's crazy. He had 5 offensive rebounds. This is one of the smallest guys we have out there. And he's got 5, offensive boards because he was cutting and going to the hoop. And, I kind of like that, because if you just assume, he's going to be a guard roaming around the perimeter, that doesn't work. I mean, look at the teams we're playing. People are cutting and moving, and, big guys are flowing up and down and all of that. And, what we saw yesterday also is, while Rupert was in there, he might have been a little more on the perimeter and making, handing off for assists and stuff. But look at what Mundi did yesterday. I think he had 3 dunks. Is that right? I mean, and, he shot the ball better from the field too. He ended up with 6 of 8 field goals. So for him to do that, he was around the basket, obviously. And so that's a nice contrast from when Rupert's not in. It's a nice change of pace rather than having the same exact thing out there. So I liked that mix up too. And I don't know if anybody really mentioned that or saw that. Shooting generally was better. Not great, but better. Certainly, it's progress. A couple guys maybe a little too happy from 3. You go to something else when the 3s aren't going. I'm thinking more of, probably more so Biggie gets a little 3 happy sometimes. He can make it. We know he can. We've seen him do it. But, sometimes I'd like to see him a little more inside, causing a little more havoc in there, because he's strong enough to do it for sure. But, the Gales got good play and good minutes out of a lot of people. We saw some reduced minutes for some guys. Jalen Barr only played 9 minutes, although he had some foul trouble. Kieran Bundy, I think maybe he wasn't so healthy. He only played the 2 minutes. But, so it's a curious thing when you add Winborn back in. Who's he going to take the minutes from? Maybe it's the position of that 3, that 2-3 crossover that Bundy and Barr have been playing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. We didn't get a lot of points out of Winborn yesterday. He had only had 4 points. He made 1 field goal, but it was off a steal and a breakaway steal and a layup, and he made 2 free throws. So, shooting, he'll only get better and more comfortable in that offense as well. Turnovers. We were talking about turnovers earlier again. You look at the numbers. The only 2 people who had real problems with the turnovers yesterday were Jai, but he also at least had 3 assists to his 4 turnovers. And then Biggie had 3 turnovers. So again, I think a little too much, guard play from Biggie. He should be a little more inside, I think, and trying not to create quite as much. Like I said, though, Rupert had 5 assists. He was very, 3 of 7, made 2 threes even. So, and so the performance was solid. Just quickly, also free throw shooting. Somebody made a comment about poor free throw shooting. Rupert was 1 of 3. That was a little uncharacteristic of him. Jai needs to get better from the line. He was 1 of 4 and missed a couple down the stretch as well. One thing I'll say, we closed out yesterday's game, but I'd like to see Reeves as the one with the ball in his hands late in the game, because he's just a much better free throw shooter. He didn't even go to the line yesterday. So, and as much as he was cutting the basket and everything, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. So, that I think otherwise, everybody else made free throws. Biggie was 3 of 4. Winboard made 2. Moody made his only 1. Menard made 2. They all made them, the rest of the guys. So it just, really just those 2 guys didn't quite make as many. But point is, there was progress. What we saw was a great press. But although we have to talk about that defense, Colgate still, and I said this on Twitter quite a bit, Colgate shot 53% overall, 48% from three. And we did send them to the line 16 times as well. So, if it wasn't for the press, it would have been a bad defensive effort for sure. What do we do about it? I mean, teams just make threes against us, and that's the biggest problem that I see with this group is that we just give up a lot of threes and we give up a lot of dribble penetration, and I'm not quite sure what to do about that. What do you do? We have guys who defend well who are getting beat off the dribble, and that's got to improve. I'd like to see maybe some work done on that end because we're struggling with that. We're playing so aggressive at the top, but when you do that, you create the breakdowns that allow the penetration, and the penetration then creates open threes. We're maybe not quite so aggressive on top, but maybe that would slow that down. I don't know. I'm not a basketball coach. That's on Tobin to figure that out and how to stop teams from hitting threes against us, because that kind of undoes a little bit what the brilliance of the press yesterday. We forced a ton of turnovers. The press wasn't like flat out broken that often either. Maybe a couple times. They just, it was just. We had 14 steals. We forced 20 turnovers. We did things. That was good stuff on that on the terms of the press. Just kind of have to. What do we do once their team gets into the half court? We need to figure that out a little more for sure. So, anyway, what does it all mean? Again, they're steps in the right direction. We've seen progress, and that's what we were hoping to see is just progress as we got healthier, as guys started to get more comfortable in the system. And, we've got one more non-conference game against a Harvard team that, quite frankly, we should beat. So we need to take care of business there. Have a nice 3-game winning streak before going into MAAC play the rest of the way. We've got a nice, fun start in MAAC play. We're playing a Marist team that's very solid. They came in and beat us last year in December, one of the early games. So that'll be an important game for us to hold serve at home if we really, truly believe we're a contender in this thing. And then we're at Santa. So certainly, we have to find a way to get wins against these teams. And again, the progress we're making makes me feel good about that stretch, especially if we hold serve and take care of Harvard first. But it's a long season. We've seen up and down play from a lot of MAAC teams, and who the heck knows what to expect? Is Mount St. Mary's even that as good as they showed going into Miami and winning? That's crazy. Of course, Merrimack has played an absolute ridiculous schedule and has played tough against some really good teams. That should translate to a lot of MAAC wins. We'll find out. It should, but, we've seen that kind of game before, and then teams fall apart. So all you can do is just hope that the team just continues to improve, the Gales, and just find ways to win games. Marist will be a great indicator where we are. It's a game we, at home we want to win, obviously, for sure. But it's a team that's projected near the top of the league, and again, they've got a great record against a pretty bad schedule. So, what does it mean? How good are they? We're going to find out for sure. And what better way for us to segue to our guest? He's kind of a new voice out there in Twitterverse. You can find him. His name is Marley Pope. You can find him at Pope_Marley, as in Bob Marley, Marley. And he does a lot of work for Marist Center Field. He's the managing editor and basketball beat writer for that site. He's going to be our go-to guy here to talk about Marist basketball. And with them on tap, I thought it would be a great time to introduce him to all of you if you already aren't sure who he was on Twitter or anywhere else. So without further ado, we go to Marley Pope. We have a new guest joining us on the IronHoops.com podcast for the first time. We bring in Marley Pope. He is the managing editor and men's basketball beat writer for Marist Center Field. Marley, thanks for joining the pod.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Guy. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, you must be pretty excited. Obviously, Marist's record is one of the more glowing in what has been a kind of a rough non-conference season for most of the MAC. So I wanted to get your take on that, and we'll talk about the MAC as well on the whole, just to see if you. I'm not say I'm completely down about it, but I thought the league would be a little better than what we've seen so far. But let's get some thoughts from you on Marist first. The Gales will be hosting the Red Foxes right after the holidays go through here. So again, glistening record, but one thing that's been of debate in MAC circles is the Marist non-conference schedule has been one of the weakest in the country. So can you put stock in the record? How good is Marist really? You've seen them probably more than anybody and listening to this. So I'll ask you, how good is Marist?
Well, I think they are a good team. I mean, 8-2, having that record as a MAC school is always a good thing in the non-conference. In terms of their program history, this is the best start they've had since 2006, 2007. So I think I would say it's definitely a good start, and they're definitely a good team. Now, the argument that they've had a weak schedule, I do see that for sure. They've played some not great teams in the non-conference, but they've also they played some teams that last year were really good teams, and this year just happened to be having a drop off. So, like Richmond, for example,
Hmm.
was regular season champs of the A10 and lost a lot of their roster, and that's a game Marist doesn't play typically in their program history, especially with John Dunn. They don't play those type of bye games, and this year they decided to do it, and they go down there and get that win. That was a big deal for them. Second game of the season in a tough environment, and then they just played Stony Brook the other day. Stony Brook had a nice run in the CAA tournament last year, and they lose a lot of guys. So it's just the turnover of some of the rosters
Yeah,
made some of their opponents a little weaker than you would have expected. But at the end of the day, they are winning these games, right? They're 8-2,
right.
and they're winning in different ways. They're winning a lot of tight games right now. They're 4-0 in games that are decided by 3 points or less. So I think some of that is come down to being able to make plays at the end of games and execute to get those wins. And hopefully for them moving forward, they stay on that good side of the luck that you have in those types of games where the ball goes the right way for you and you're able to come out with those close wins.
So
And last thing I'll say to start, first through the first 10 games, they won their first two MAC games. Two, Mount St. Mary's has surprised a lot of people this season, and they gritted out a win there at home. And then 2 days later, they go down to Manhattan and play a beautiful offensive game to start 2-0 in the MAC, gives themselves a good foundation before they return to MAC play, like you said, against Iona on January 3rd.
well, and certainly, I mean, I mean, you still have to win the games, no matter who you're playing. And like you said, Marist does find ways to win. Home or road doesn't matter. They bring what they bring, and they are who they are. And certainly, going into this max season, everybody kind of felt like Marist was going to be one of the teams near the top of the league because of what you mentioned, the continuity. At least they brought back a core of guys, whereas a lot of teams, for instance, Iona, had to replace everyone, and you just didn't know what you were going to get. So now that you've seen Marist this far along, we're a month and a half or so into the season, maybe a little more by now. Are they what you thought? Are they what you thought they were going to be?
I would say for the most part, yeah. I mean, they're the backcourt is what leads the team. If you're looking at the roster with Josh Pasquarelli, Jane Collins Roberts, um, I'm a little surprised about the defense isn't the same. If you look at some advanced metrics, but I think they played better defensively in the last 4 or 5 games than the first, 3 to 4. That's how John Dunn he wants to play defense, wants to get stops, wants to make it hard for their opponent to score. And I think they've done a better job of that in recent, maybe the last 4 games or so. So that's a little bit of a difference from last season, but I think contrary to that, the offense has definitely picked up a good bit compared to last season. They're scoring at a better rate. They're much more efficient. They're right now their 3-point shooting dropped off a bit the last couple games. It's down, I think, as a team they're shooting 33% from 3-point range, which is you probably want that to be a bit higher. But for the first, I'd say 6, 7 games of the season, they were pretty hot from three as a team. So maybe that rebounds a bit once they keep going into MAC play. But overall, I did expect um, the team's performance to be where it is right now. I think I wouldn't have told you they would have started 8-2 through their first 10 though.
Mm.
I would have guessed they would have dropped maybe one or two extra games and be in the 6-4, 7-3 range. But to be 8-2 now gives them a lot of confidence and a lot of belief in themselves moving forward.
It's funny when you look at a team like Marist and you see the pieces they had coming back. I mean, you just assume that they're going to do really well. A lot of us did that with Ryder last year. We just looked at what they had returning, and then and the rest of the league just getting obliterated by the portal and by graduation, and then Ryder just didn't look so good. If that were to happen to Marist, like if you look up and it's late February and Marist is, I don't know, sitting in like sixth or seventh place as opposed to say top three or four, which is kind of what we all expect. And then they, go out quietly in the quarterfinal. What happened? Well, why would you think that could even happen?
Well, I think the first thing you would think of is just the lack of scoring. Right now, their offense is executing pretty well, and Pasquarelli is averaging 18 points a game. So that would be the first thing to look at if they're not scoring the ball as efficiently as they are right now. I think another thing could be if they keep playing in these tight games. They've already played two overtime games this season, and some of those games don't go their way. That gives you a couple extra losses in your record that or could go one way or the other. So I think those two would be what I would say would happen.
Mm.
From an effort in a hustle standpoint and the way they play hard, I don't see that dropping off. Really, I think that's something that they care a lot about in terms of how they want to play and what their culture is with Coach Dunn. So I would say it would be, the offense not being as efficient as it has been, particularly Pasquarelli. His numbers right now are pretty are off the charts to start through the first 10 games. So it'd be
Mhm.
that, and also some of these close games that they've played in not going their way.
Okay. Now let's flip it. Let's assume it's Atlantic City. Marist finished first. Then they held serve throughout the whole MAC tournament and they won it. So they've actually been better than you and everybody else would have probably anticipated. What did they do? What happened? What would take for that to happen?
I think the first thing is, just to look at one player. I would say Jane Collins Roberts became more dangerous offensively. He's still a good contributor on offense, 8 points a game, 3 assists per game. Is playing the most minutes on the team. But from an efficiency standpoint, him getting his jump shot back, his mid range that he showed last year, and this year just hasn't fallen for him yet. I think that would be one thing to look at if he's able to knock down some mid range shots, if he's able to be more aggressive offensively when he has the ball in his hands. That gives Marist another layer on offense that opposition will have to look at and try to defend. And I think after that, it would be more bench production. Right now, the John Dunn plays a lot of guys, but right now the bench is not. There's not a single player on the bench that's having, I would say, a massive impact. I
Mm,
think Jason Schofield right now I would say has the biggest impact off the bench. The only issue is he's playing 10 minutes a night.
mm.
So if he were to play more, be that backup center for Jackson Price and be, a guy that has a great interior presence, has a great touch around the rim. I mean, he's averaging 5 points a game with only playing 10 minutes. So he's playing with a ton of efficiency right now. And if he gets more touches, if he gets more playing time, he gets more acclimated to just playing college basketball because he redshirted last year. That can give Marist somebody off the bench who they can depend on right away to be a contributor and be someone that John Dunn can look to in the closing moments of a game.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody's almost through non-conference play, and then we're going to get right into MAC play for the rest of the way. From what you've seen, we've seen some teams be up and down for sure, but Who do you have your eye on in MAC right now? Who do you think is playing that in a way that you can say, all right, that's a team that's going to be in this like of this race. And then who else would you say maybe hasn't looked so good yet, but is a team to watch out for come February or so?
Well, to the first part of your question, I would say Mount St. Mary's has looked pretty bright. When they came to Poughkeepsie last week, I was very impressed with just the sheer intensity that they play with, the physicality. They're everywhere. They press like crazy. They make it so difficult to play against, so frustrating to play against, and that can take a lot of players, a lot of teams out of a game. And I think that's why they're 8-4 right now. They just beat Miami on the road the other
Yep.
night. So that's a team you don't want to play, for sure. Just because of how they play, the personnel that they have. They play with a lot of size, and that's just a team that's very hard to play on short rests, an AC or short time to scout, to practice against that press. So to answer the first part of your question, I would say Mount St. Mary's. And then for the second part of your question, there's a decent amount of options right now. I think I'm a bit interested by what Sienna's been doing with Coach McNamara in his first season. I've been pretty impressed with how, they're what's their record? 5-7.
Hmm.
But I've been impressed with how he's brought the roster together pretty quickly with a ton of moving pieces. And he comes from Syracuse. He's a good coach. I like some of their guards, and they could be a team that, as the season goes on, that gives them more time to gel together and learn how to play off of each other, and potentially be, someone to look for in Atlantic City as, maybe a 5 or 6 seed that could punch above their weight a bit.
All right. And we'll come full circle now, and I'll ask you what you've seen of Iona thus far. A quick summary here from my perspective is we kind of started really rocky, and we knew we would. At least some Iona fans knew that we would. Playing a little better lately, coming off a win at Colgate today. Um, Still a work in progress though. But I'm looking forward to see how we keep going in MAC play. We're fortunate to be able to beat St. Peter's in opening weekend after what was an absolutely horrendous performance at Sacred Heart. So they've been very uneven. And your thoughts on the Gales from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean the first month of the season, the schedule that Iona played was really tough. So you're learning a lot about yourself in those games where you're playing really some good high major teams and then playing West Virginia on the road. But I think just Iona just needs to give themselves time to figure out how to play with each other because the talent is there, right? I mean, Coach Tobin Anderson brings in a lot of guys that have some high pedigree and have a lot of talent. So it's just figuring out how to make that work. And hopefully the Gales can be a little bit more a better shooting the ball because the offensive numbers don't look great. And if you're not shooting well, it's hard to stay in some games if you're just not making shots. So if from my view, I would say for Iona to kind of ignore the record, not look at that and just focus on what you're seeing game by game, how guys are learning to play, what roles they're fitting into, and particularly on the offense, how they can improve some of those numbers and be more efficient and score, be more consistent with their scoring.
From what you've seen, how close to the top do you think an Iona can get? I mean, I know that's a tough question. I don't know how much you've seen of them. Obviously, the ceiling is high, but I also think the floor is pretty low if they don't fix some things that are still issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if looking at it right now, it's hard to say they would be a top three team come end of season. So, I would say right now they're definitely in that 5 or 6 range with Sienna, and I would need to see more to put them ahead of teams like Marist, a team like Merrimack, Mount St. Mary's, Quinnipiac is kind of in that mix too. But I definitely agree with you with they get on a run, they get hot, they could definitely, completely rebound from the non-conference and, the rough losses that they've had for sure. But for right now, I would say it's safe to say they could finish the season in the 4, 5, 6 range for sure.
All right. Well, sounds like you've been reading the Iona message board. I don't know if you have, but that's some of the things that have been talked about. Marley, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast here. Good luck to Marist the rest of the way. We'll certainly be following you as well, and on Marist Center Field and on Twitter. And it'll be a fun MAAC ride. It always is. Anybody listening to this knows that. So good luck to you guys the rest of the way, and we'll catch up with you down the line again.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. We'll stay in contact.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thanks again to Marley Pope for joining the podcast. The Gales are winners of 2 straight, both the men and the women. How about that? Things turning around in New Rochelle? We'll see. Next up is Harvard. Everybody have a happy and joyous Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on the other side. We'll be back on this pod in a couple weeks. Go Gales.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com with publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.